Welcome to round number 4 of the World Championship. We had an opening surprise on move 5, which we're going to get into here in just a second. First, I want to make a quick announcement. Black Friday, there's a sale on my flagship course, Breaking 1500. If you're rated anywhere below 1500 and you want to improve at chess, you want to have a little bit more fun, you want to stop making so many blunders, you want to learn how to think and calculate and work on your tactics, openings, endings, it's a complete course. It covers everything that you need if you're rated under 1500. So make sure you check that out. It's $100 off for the next couple of days. Black Friday sale. We don't do these often, so make sure you take advantage of that if you want. Having said that, let's jump into round number 4. Going into this round, both players are tied with 1.5 out of 3 points. Ding is playing white, and he starts with the move knight to f3, which is called the ready opening. And the thing about knight f3 is it's a very flexible move. This is actually a move that you see a lot more as you get higher and higher up the rating ladder, and it's flexible because you can really play a lot of things. If you want to play g3 and go into like a King's Indian attack setup, you could do that. If you want to play d4 and maybe bishop f4, you can transpose to a London system. If you want to play d4 and c4, you could transpose to like a Queen's Gambit. If you want to play maybe just c4, you might end up in an English opening. Like, there's so many different ways that you can play. I think that's why a lot of strong players play it, because it gives them a lot of options. Okay, so Gukesh plays d5, which is a good move, and Ding plays e3. Again, it's kind of a flexible move. Like in a lot of these different openings we looked at, you're going to play e3, maybe not the King's Indian, but e3 is a useful move. But again, he's very flexible. He's not really showing, is he going to play d4, is he going to play c4, is he going to play something like b3 or who knows what else, right? Knight f6, b3. So now he kind of shows, okay, he's going to fianchetto the bishop here. He's going for this. It's almost like a Queen's Indian setup. So there's an opening with black where you would play the Queen's Indian and you would put your pieces in this configuration, kind of. And that's sort of what it looks like he's doing. Bishop to f5 develops the bishop. Bishop to e2. Okay, that kind of makes sense, right? You want a castle. You got to put your bishop somewhere. You're probably not going to go here and get captured. You can't go here. You can't go here because you're just going to get chased away. So the only place the bishop can really go to is here. h6. Now, why did he play h6 when he should be developing his pieces, right? The idea is that if he plays e6 to get this bishop out, white might play the move knight to h4, attacking the bishop, and at some point, you're going to be able to capture that bishop. It can't run away, even if it tries to. And once you do that, now you have what's called the bishop pair. And at the top levels, the bishop pair is very valuable because technically bishops are slightly better than knights. And strong players know how to make use of that. And so a lot of times they won't give up their bishop for no reason unless they get something else in return. And in that example, you weren't really getting anything as black. So Gukesh is like, no, I don't want to give up my bishop. I'll play the move h6 so that if this ever happens, I'll always be able to tuck my bishop back on h7 and it's not going to get traded by the knight. Okay? Bishop to a3. So this is the moment in the game where Ding is kind of surprising Gukesh. Now, I looked in the database. I think this move has only been played a couple of times. So already on move 5, we're pretty much in uncharted territories. And this is kind of rare. Like a lot of times these grandmasters will play lines that they've seen before. They've studied. They kind of know like what to expect. This is new. And I want to point something out here. Richard Report is somebody who is a friend of Ding's, who I believe is his working with him as like a, I don't know if coach is the right word, because Ding's a world champion. Like, he doesn't really need a coach in the same sense that like you or I might need a coach. But Richard Rapport is helping him prepare these opening lines, right? Rapport is known for these sort of creative lines, right? Like coming up with ideas that, aren't played very often. And that's kind of what we are seeing here, like bishop to a3. Normally, you would see bishop b2, right? This is why you would fianchetto here. You want your bishop to be on this long diagonal, kind of controlling the center. So why is he going here? Well, the idea is if black sort of continues naturally, like e6, he's going to take this. And now it doesn't matter how you capture, you're not going to be able to castle kingside. And this is an awkward position to be in. It's not bad. It's not like he's losing the game, but it's awkward because you want to get your rook to the center. But how do you do it now? I mean, yeah, you could spend time to like move your king, bring the rook, move your king back, but that takes a lot of time and it's kind of awkward. Same thing if you take with the rook, right? You can't castle if you move your rook. He could castle this way, but that's not probably what he wanted to do. So it's an awkward move, and I invite you guys to pause. If you were in this situation as black, how would you deal with this? What do you think you would play? All right, well, hopefully you had a chance to maybe think about that. And the move that Gukesh plays is knight to d7. And it's a very nice move because he's going to develop his knight anyway. He goes ahead and does it first. Why? Because it defends the bishop, so that now when he pushes his pawn, guess what? He has the option to recapture with the knight, and he doesn't lose castling rights. And that's exactly what we see. Ding castles, he plays e6, Ding trades the bishop, and Gukesh captures with the knight, and he preserves the right to castle. Yes, he's going to waste, a move. He has to move his knight out of the way, but that's not as bad as having the king kind of here, where it's really difficult to get the rook back. Okay, so we see c4. Ding is trying to use this moment when black hasn't castled to start putting some pressure on the center. Knight comes here, brings out the knight, attacks the center, and then Gukesh castles, and he avoids kind of the problems that were posed by that bishop to a3 move. Okay, so Ding trades the pawns, and then he plays the move b4, and he's trying to expand on the queen side. There's this position. So there's an attack in chess called the minority attack, where you can push your pawns forward, and it's when you have 2 pawns against 3. So you have the minority, you have less pawns, and sometimes you can actually push these forward and create weaknesses. So just as an example, if I were to play the move a4 and black is going to just move their king back and forth, obviously this did not happen in the game. I play, let's just say b5, they move their king back and forth, and let's just say I trade. This could become a target. For example, if I play the move, let's just say d4, and if somehow I'm able to blockade this, and again, I'm obviously not doing anything for black. This is just an oversimplified example of how I might get into a really good position. Look, something like this. I've now blockaded this backward pawn. You can't really move it forward easily. This is a target for me. Of course, I'm blundering pawns and stuff here. Just ignore that. What I'm trying to show you is like, this is why you might try to play the minority attack, to do something like this. So it kind of resembles that, going back to this position, it kind of resembles maybe like a minority attack type of situation, where he's going to try to use these pawns to create some sort of weaknesses that he can attack. Okay. Knight to d4 is what he plays, attacks the bishop, and now you see this h6 move actually was kind of useful. He can tuck the bishop all the way back on h7. There's no way for the knight to attack it. Ding plays queen to b3, still kind of focusing on the queen side. And they did, and when they were analyzing this game, they mentioned this move f4, which is interesting. Maybe now, maybe in the future, but the idea is if you can get this pawn to f5 at some point, this bishop is pretty much blocked out of the game, which is kind of annoying for black. Now, of course, they're going to be able to do other things with their other pieces, and you have to make sure you defend this, or the bishop might actually just take your pawn. But I thought that was an interesting idea. But Ding decided to not do that, and instead just kind of focused on the queen side with queen b3. So now we get knight to e5. He's bringing his knight into the center of the board. Again, this f4 move is kind of something to keep an eye on. They talked about this idea in the during the game, where the knight's going to come over here and put pressure on the pawn. But Ding decided he didn't want to deal with that, and instead he goes for a4. So he's pushing the pawns, trying to maybe create some weaknesses, or even as an example, let's just say black were to play a move like a6. If you can play a5, what you've done now is kind of clamped down on black's position, and then maybe your knight can jump in, and this can get very annoying for black because the black doesn't have a lot of space to move their pieces, right? So these are maybe some of the things that he was thinking about. But Gukesh plays the move rook to c8. And his idea is very straightforward. He wants to play b6 and c5 and kick this knight away. And it's a very straightforward plan. It makes a lot of sense. If you can get these 2 pawns in the center, you're gaining control of a critical area of the board. You're doing it with a tempo when you make the knight move. And that's kind of what his plan was. So Ding plays a5. Gukesh goes b6 anyway. And right here, there was a really interesting idea that they were talking about. And Ding could have played the move bishop to a6, which attacks the rook. And of course, the rook doesn't really want to move away over here because you want to keep it on the c file so you can support c5. So rook c7, most likely. And then if you attack this knight and it jumps into c4, there's this interesting line where black might sacrifice the pawn here so that they could push c5 and just really start to open up the position and use the rook and the queen. But then your knight can jump in. You can actually ignore this attack, because if they take you, you're taking their rook, so they don't want to do that trade, right? And after they move somewhere, you can actually just win a pawn like this. Or maybe if the rook moves back to c8, you can win a pawn over here. There were some really interesting things that White could have done if they would have played the move bishop to a6, okay? But Ding didn't do that. All right, that's just what could have potentially maybe happened. I don't know if he looked at it and he didn't like something about it. If he didn't see that idea, I'm not totally sure. But he played instead knight to f3. And he's dealing with this in a different way. He's getting his knight away from there right away. The problem is he's trading pieces. Not a problem. It's just some of those ideas that we looked at don't work anymore, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. So Gukesh trades, he recaptures, and he plays the move d4. And he's trying to kind of open up his queen, take advantage of the fact that he's gaining space now, and attack this knight. Knight goes back. He trades the pawns. And whenever you get a position like this where there's only a couple of open files, pieces start trading, when neither side has any real weaknesses at the super grandmaster level, you start thinking about draw, right? You start thinking like, are we going to go for a draw here? Like, there's no time advantage really for either player. They're pretty equal on the clock this game, right? And so already they started talking about draws. Now, as the game goes on, we get a couple of more trades here. There's an interesting thing you should know. FIDE, I don't remember when, but at some point they changed the rules. I don't know if this was just this year, if this was like last year, or I don't exactly know, but they changed the rules to where you can't offer a draw before move 40. Okay, we're on move, this is move 21. So they're a long way from that. So even though the position kind of looks like a draw, you can't just say, hey, do you want to draw? You can't do that. The only way you can get a draw is threefold repetition, when you get the same position 3 times. But the problem with that is if you're just like randomly trying to like find a situation like, okay, let me just like move back and forth, you might be making bad moves, right? And your opponent has to kind of go along with you and make the moves back and forth as well. So that was just something interesting to keep, to think about as we go through. So captures on b6, knight to c3, rook to d8. And again, you're noticing, look at this. Trading is probably going to happen. And that's exactly what we see. And now queens and rooks like this with no minor pieces. Again, if there was a specific weakness that one side could take advantage of, that would be a different story. And you might say, well, doesn't black have 2 pawns against 1? Like, can't they create a passed pawn and like push their pawn down the board and win the game? The answer is no, because the queen and the rooks are going to be able to stop the pawn. And 1 pawn is not enough. Now, if this b4 pawn was gone and you had 2 pawns that were connected that could support each other as they push down the board, that's a different story. But 1 pawn like that, it's just not enough at this level, right? Now, if you and I are playing this position, of course, somebody's probably going to mess something up somewhere along the way, and maybe you can win. But in this case, it's very unlikely. Nevertheless, they play on. h3, c5. Trades the rooks, trades the pawn. So black does have the passed pawn. And like I said, if you had some way to push it, okay. But look what Ding is going to do. He's going to blockade it. And this is actually very instructive for you guys. If you're playing a game and maybe you're down 1 pawn like this, what should you do? Well, he just stops the pawn, right? You don't let the pawn push forward. And at the same time, he's putting his pieces on nice squares, and he's not allowing things like rook to d2, right? Notice if this rook invades and you start having to worry about checkmate threats on your king and a pawn at the same time, that's when you really start to have problems, right? But as long as you keep it where it's only one thing that you're worrying about, just 1 passed pawn, nothing else is going on, you're probably going to be just fine. So rook to d5, he plays g3, f5. They were talking about this is a little bit of an aggressive move from Gukesh. Like, he's not willing to accept the draw right now. He's trying to stop white from playing e4. It's a little bit risky because you do open up your king, but you can always tuck it over here, and that's exactly what we see. Queen goes back. He plays e4. We get a trade. He pins the rook, and it almost looks like, wait a second, he's attacking the rook. What's happening? If you go here, that's a huge blunder. Can you guys see why that's a blunder? Because the rook is pinned, all you have to do is attack it with your pawn. You're going to be winning a rook, and you're going to win the game, right? So there are ways that Gukesh could have messed up, but of course, he's one of the best players in the world. He's not going to fall for some cheap trick. He goes queen d5, which threatens white's queen, also pins it, forces a queen trade, and now we just have this rook and pawn ending. Again, yes, you have the passed pawn, but do you have an easy way to push it down the board? No, you do not. And the issue is, if you try to bring your king over here to support it, then what about these pawns, right? And then white can go on the offensive and start attacking these, because while your king is coming here, maybe their king is coming over here, or maybe they just move their king up and you don't even get a chance to bring your king over, right? And there's just not really anything that you can do. All right, so he tries to bring the king, but like I said, white's king gets here first. Rook to d4 check. Ding goes back, and there's a moment right here where he could have played king e5. Now, king e5 is interesting because if you look at king e5 carefully, you'll notice that the pawn now has no way to be defended. You can't go here, I'll take your rook. You can't go here, I'll take your rook. And I'm going to just take your pawn. So why didn't Ding do this? Well, it's because Gukesh now would play rook to d2, attacking on f2. And if you do this, he's going to just trade. If you try to hold on to your pawn, let's just say you push it, he's now has targets. He can start attacking these guys. Let's just say, I don't know, rook g2. What are you going to do? If you play g4, now he can go rook g3, attack this guy. And you have to decide, like, okay, if you push this, you're going to lose this. If you trade here, that's just a trade. Maybe you could say this is like something for white, but realistically, this is still a draw, okay? And he's going to be able to like start checking you from behind. There's just not going to be anything there. That being said, Ding didn't even want to mess around with that. He just decided to go back, not even let the rook invade and attack his pawns. This is the safe choice. If you're happy with the draw, this is what you do. And they repeated moves, and we get the draw. So that's it. We're currently tied 2-2. I don't know if this is what Ding was hoping for from this game. After, the loss, he wanted to just kind of settle down, maybe. Interesting opening choice, I will say that. And, wish I could tell you there was more fireworks, but this is what we have. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Don't forget the Black Friday sale on Breaking 1500. $100 off. Check the link in the description. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time. Stay sharp. Play smart. Take care.